into neural signals. And these can be then manipulated by higher level cognitive faculties. That's basically all that these lowest cognitive faculties do. Then on the higher level, internal senses and input systems, they receive these neural signals, and on this basis, by this kind of mysterious process that none of them really explains well, they infer how the world really is, so what objects in the world really are. So these are the similarities, and this is, I think, what's relevant for their architectures of the mind.
So the is the input this stage here is equivalent to Aquinas with cogitative power in Soda?
They both distinguish different levels of internal senses and input systems. So there are different kinds of internal senses for Aquinas. The highest is the cogitative power, and the highest produces these phantas representing substances of a kind. That's for Aquinas. For Fodor, also the highest input system, at least that's how I understood it, end up with concepts, basically, sensory concepts.
So Aquinas has, but you don't get concepts in Aquinas until the active intellect starts to work on the stuff the cogitative power is produced, right?
Well, that's a little bit mysterious in him, right? Because he calls the cogitative power particular reason, and it seems that it already, well, he says that it cannot work unless it cooperates with the intellect. So it seems that it has to have access to concepts somehow. It already categorizes in some way. It already puts things in different classes. It says this is a thing of a kind. I mean,
that's why sort of there's a big puzzle here about, you know, the stuff on being. I know you probably don't want to go there.
That's my favorite part, really. But it's the most difficult.
Yeah, so the picture you have roughly is when you talk about the innate being detective mechanism is not the trivial point that we are designed to, you know, react to things that exist. It's pretty likely that everything in some sense is like that, anything that can react. But that we can detect substances which for Aquinas are the basic kind of units of reality, which for him are macroscopic objects like especially organisms and things like that. From the sensory flux we can somehow home in on detect the substances. And so it's not a theory about the concept of being, even though statements like the first thing the intellect conceives is being, because the Latin there is ens, which could be read as the first thing. I mean, people translate it with a capital B. There's no capital B in the Latin, in the manuscripts. It's just, you could just read that the first thing intellect conceives is a thing that exists, right? And that immediately diminishes the need to think there's a concept. But on the other hand, one could press the question whether, you know, in defense of it, some kind of innate concept of being that, well, do animals have this capacity you're talking about? Surely to get around in the world, they must be able to identify substances too, if that's in fact what the world is like, made up of substances. They're not going to last very long if they can't do that. But it seems that this capacity of positing, I get the sense, is not one we'd want to posit in a dog. Well, what's the difference? And now you start to think, well, perhaps the difference is that the cogitative power is applying concepts of being to the substances it's detecting, that the animal is not. It's a little like Aquinas' view about appetite, right? The dog sees the food, and it's just naturally designed to be drawn to it, but doesn't conceptualize it as good. The difference between us is we see the pizza, and not only have the animal attraction, but we have to say, well, that's really good, I want some of that, right? So we conceptualize, and I'm wondering whether the, you know, that's what's going on here, which would seem to say, where does the concept of being come from then? And the answer would be, well, it's in the cogitative power's back pocket, it's an innate concept that it pulls out to apply. So,
well, long question. So the cogitative power in humans has this counterpart in animals, which is called estimative power. And in animals, the estimative power does this mysterious work of recognizing more based on sensory data. Right? Whether animals have these innate mechanisms that transcendentals stand for, I don't know. But the cogitative power is not applying the concept being. So Aquinas says, right, that the cogitative power cognizes something as an individual substance of a certain kind. That's on my own hand of story.
Emergency.
Yeah. So it cognizes an individual substance of a certain kind. See, when you analyze the statement, this really tells you that the cogitative power has to apply already three transcendentals to the sensory data. So transcendentals are, being, essence, and one in this case. So you say that N stands for an existing thing. Well, really, if that's what you said, for Aquinas wouldn't agree with it, because transcendental being really stands just for maybe the act of being. If you say an existing thing, you're already talking about being and thing. So two transcendentals. So that's why it seems, right, since he's clearly emphasizing that it's being, which is this first most important thing in cognition, without which there is no cognition possible, that it cannot be just an existing thing, because then it would mean that he's talking about more than one transcendental.
Well, there are people, of course, who think that he's not talking about the transcendental notion of being in these comments. As you mentioned, this occasion, like Whipple, for example, thinks he's talking about material beings.
Yeah.
And so roughly something along the lines of what I was suggesting.
Right, but I think when you focus on how the cogitative power is supposed to work, I think it makes more sense to say this one. Because for Aquinas, transcendentals are really this really cool tool. He says, well, these are features of everything that exists, of everything that is real, of everything that is really intelligible.
Mm-hmm.
And then he says, and these are also ways in which our intellect operates. So, and these two match, obviously. So it's very useful tool, because that's how our intellect works. That's what the world is like. That's why we have cognition, and we can explain it. And it can be that these ways in which the intellect works are actually the result of evolution.
That's for modern Aquinas.
Yes.
Before we move on, could you just clarify that point you made about cognitive power is not applying